Thanks everyone for coming today, braving the rain. I'm actually not unhappy that we're indoors amidst all this. So even though the venue change might have caused a little confusion, I'm glad you all made it here. My name is Evan Hanczor. I'm going to be the moderator today. Before we start, Community Bookstore was supposed to be here selling books. Fortunately, they aren't able to make it, but you can order all of these authors' books on their website, and I'm sure there's a way to get some signatures if you're, diligent about it at some point, maybe through the bookstore or through the authors themselves. At the end of the program, there's another panel coming in, so if you want to hang out for that, that's great, but if not, please clear your seats so there's room for the next group to come in. I'll introduce myself first. My name is Evan Hanczor. I'm a chef and writer. I was the chef at Egg Restaurant in Williamsburg for many years before we closed at the end of 2020. I also run an organization called Tables of Contents, which uses food as an entry point for experiencing literature, art, and culture. We do dinners with writers inspired by their books and with musicians inspired by their work and visual artists, et cetera, et cetera. So cookbooks are a thing I'm super interested and excited about because they bring together those two areas, the craft of cooking, the craft of writing, and storytelling in a way that empowers people to kind of become their fuller selves in the kitchen. And we have three amazing cooks and cookbook authors here whose books have done that. I had the pleasure of reading through all of them in preparation for this event. And I'm really excited to have them in conversation today. So I'll give a quick intro and then I'll let each of them fill it out a little bit. I'll start at the end here. Cal Peternell is a New York Times bestselling author of 12 recipes, a recipe for cooking, and almonds, anchovies, and pancetta. Cal's drive to teach people the pleasure and satisfaction to be found cooking at home led him to co-create the Cooking by Ear podcast. If you haven't listened to it, definitely check it out. And before that, Cal was the chef at Alice Waters Chez Panisse for over 20 years. I imagine you may have heard of that little restaurant out on the West Coast. Cal grew up on a small farm in New Jersey, and in warming my art and food heart, earned a BFA in painting from the School of Visual Arts in New York City. And his newest book, which we'll be discussing today, is Burnt Toast and Other Disasters, a guide for making things better, which I'm hoping you can make a lot of things better with this book. We'll see how far that can go.
Not just food.
No.
Everything better.
Matt Rodbard in the center here is a writer, editor, and author of food and culture books with more than 2 decades of experience working in television, magazines, book publishing, and online media. So sort of representing another angle of working in and through food. He's author of Koreatown, a cookbook, a New York Times bestseller, Food IQ, an Amazon and Publishers Weekly bestseller, and the founding editor of online food and culture magazine Taste, which I personally love to reference and read. The winner of 2 James Beard Foundation Awards as well. And his newest book that we're talking about today is Food IQ, 100 Questions, Answers, and Recipes to Raise Your Cooking Smarts. And last but not least, my friend Nicole A. Taylor. Definitely helped us stay alive at Egg in many ways, supporting our staff and also, thankfully, I think enjoying our food over the years. She's a James Beard Award-nominated food writer, a master home cook, and a producer. She's written for the New York Times, Bon Appetit, and Food and Wine. Nicole is the author of the Up South Cookbook and the Last OG Cookbook. She's the executive producer of If We So Choose, which is a short documentary about the desegregation of an iconic Southern fast food joint. Nicole is also the co-founder of The Maroon, which is a marketplace and retreat house focused on radical rest for Black creatives. And her latest book is Watermelon and Redbirds, a cookbook for Juneteenth and Black Celebrations. Can we just kick it off with a round of applause for these 3 authors? So I want to let each of you introduce yourselves a bit too. That's kind of the boilerplate of your accomplishments, but there's so much of each of your personalities in this book, and you're each coming at your books from different angles. A home cook, someone working in food media and sort of public education around food, a chef at one of the most revered restaurants in the country. And I just love to hear a little bit more about how you decided to write these books, and what led you to this particular cookbook today. Nicole, maybe I'll start with you since you're nearby.
Yeah, it's so funny. did our moderator or no, our MC introduce the entire panel as chefs, and I almost like cringe. I'm like, am I a chef? Yeah, no, it's a total funny thing because I'm often telling people that I'm not a chef. I think that my definition of a chef is someone who can run a kitchen and they can order stuff and they have a staff that they're taking care of. I consider myself a master home cook, and I've been getting that question a lot over the last years. Like, what do you mean by master home cook? Mm-hmm. And I feel like this book really explains what it means to be a master home cook. I am a person that 20 people, that's all I can do. I can only do like 20 people.
That's
if I have to cook for more than 20 people, I'm totally getting nervous. But my kitchen is set up that any person, if you worked at Chez Panisse or Egg or you are Matt, you can come in and I have everything from cheesecloth to the best pots, pans, and knives. And I've been cooking since I was about 13 years old. I'm born and raised in Athens, Georgia. Lived there for about 13 years before I moved to New York City in 2008. This is actually my third cookbook. My first cookbook is titled The Up South Cookbook, and it is about my migration, my journey from the American South to the Northeast. And then the second cookbook that I wrote, The Last OG Cookbook, which was a fun book. How many people have watched Tracy Morgan's show, The Last OG? Okay, so there's a book that's inspired by the TBS series featuring Tracy Morgan, so I had the opportunity to write the book, and it was super fun. And my latest book, the first cookbook dedicated to Juneteenth, came out a month before Juneteenth this year, and it's been an honor to be able to shepherd this book. And I will say, to answer the end of your question, how this book came to be, it totally was not on my radar. I didn't even, when I say not on my radar, I didn't think that, I thought this book was too niche. My literary agent, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, said, you should write a Juneteenth cookbook. This was 2017. And I literally deleted her email because I wanted to write a breakfast brunch cookbook. Uh-huh. And she deleted my email. I deleted her email, and she kept coming back. I think Juneteenth is the book for you. So pre-pandemic, pre-George Floyd uprising, pre-Juneteenth, the national holiday being on the tongues of everyone, I started working on this book proposal. And during the pandemic, I got laid off. I basically put my head down, worked on this proposal, sold the book in the summer of 2020, and spent the last 2 years writing Watermelon and Redbirds.
Well, Nicole, I'll thank you, Evan, for the intro and inviting me here. I also wrote the book during the pandemic too, Food IQ. So these books are very special. We wrote them in these crazy times, and my book, which I co-wrote with Daniel Holzman, who is a chef. I am certainly not a chef. I'm a food writer and editor, but it's inspired by the questions I ask my friend the chef, Daniel Holzman. And so we kind of crystallized the first 100 questions that we think every home cook really kind of has in the back of their head, but they really don't know quite the answer. Or it's a question like, why is the farmer's market so expensive? That has like a pretty long answer, and we actually stretched that out. So that's what inspired it, was just me being the writer journalist, kind of like cozying up with my buddy Daniel and really just going over these questions time and again. And we think we landed on a format, and we can talk about formatting a little bit, that's new and interesting and works well for it. But I want to just say that the pandemic books that came out, like, we didn't get to really promote these books the same way that books are coming out now. So I think this is my first public talk for this book. So thank you for joining. And I think editorially, we're at a book festival, so we can talk about craft. There probably won't be a time in my future where I had that much time to write a book. I don't know if you share this sentiment, because I know we're in the same season. It really was special that we were able to really focus on a project like this. So
well, thanks. It's an honor to be here with you all. This is my fourth book, and this one came about it's called Burnt Toast and Other Disasters, was not the working title. Had a different title. My publishers didn't like it, so we came up with this one. This was actually a toss-off. I was like, why don't we just call it Burnt Toast in a Can of Beans then, damn it? And they're like, that's good. But this one came about when I was, I lived in this bubble of amazing access to like the best ingredients, in the Bay Area, and then specifically at Chez Panisse. And when I left the restaurant, I still had access like everyone else, but not quite what I used to have. And I started to think about, what do you do? Like my formula for cooking was always like, buy the very best vegetables from the farmer's market and then have some olive oil, and that's kind of it. You like can make it great. But what if you don't have those things? And I was visiting my parents, and they always want me to cook for them, and they said, what are you going to cook for us? And I was like, well, you know how I do my thing. I go to the market, I see what's good, I get inspired. And they're like, okay. And I was like, so where are we going to shop? And they're like, there's a really good Walmart, there's great stuff, or, the Piggly Wiggly. And, I like the Piggly Wiggly, but I wasn't getting inspired by the ingredients. And so this is a book that came out of that like, what do you do if you just need to pull it together from stuff that isn't really so inspiring on its own? Or what if you burnt the toast, or you burnt the meat, or what if you get some chicken that's like fine, but it's not really that great, or you got the same old like broccoli again, and it's perfectly good, but you're just tired of it? Or what if maybe you just don't have the time and you're really hungry, but you can't stand just like another box of mac and cheese? Like, how can you? So there's a chapter about hacking packages of how to put together stuff from that. And actually, this book was different for me to write, because in the other books I kind of just wrote down what I do in the kitchen, and this one was like I had to learn as I went along too, and got my kids to kind of help me. What do you do with your box of macaroni and cheese? And we came up with the title, and my family all helps with the illustrations. We have 3 kids who do illustrations. I did some. My wife, who's here, also did some, including the cover. And it's been great. And like you say, it's been a weird one because it's the pandemic, and but happy to be here with y'all.
Yeah, it's so interesting to be featuring books written during the pandemic, when I think for so many of us, our relationship to food and cooking changed drastically. In many cases, our relationship to how we accessed ingredients might have changed, who we were cooking for, and who was cooking for us also changed a lot. For those of us who haven't put together a cookbook, you all touched on this a little bit, but I'm really curious. Each of these books has a particular structure to it. Watermelon and Redbirds is centered around holiday, around tradition, around gatherings. Food IQ is a book structured around questions, answers to questions. And then Burnt Toast is kind of differently structured around answers to questions, answers to fixes. How do you fix something when you make a mistake, which is, I think, such a powerful even just mindset to share with people in the kitchen, because disaster often feels like disaster, and in reality, usually it's just a path to something that might even end up being better. So I'm curious, when you each had your concepts for this book, how you went about structuring those themes, throughout the text. And any of y'all can jump in first if that sparks something for you.
Well, I had to, I had a list of things that are like disasters. By the part of the inspiration also for this book, and you maybe get this too, is people want to know. Like, what's the worst mistake you ever did? Like, what was the biggest disaster that ever happened, right? Because everyone wants to know the juicy dirt. And there are some things, I say in here at some point, some stuff you can't fix. You just gotta like throw it out. So I
never serve your mistakes.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless you fix them first.
Or at least never, what Julia Child's thing was like, serve it with confidence, right?
Yeah.
Like put lots of whipped cream on.
Yes.
Right.
Totally.
Never say like, no, it didn't come out the way I liked it, really.
Right.
You just say, here it is.
Whipped cream certainly will fix most things.
yeah, exactly. So in terms of the structure for this, I kind of came up with those categories. Some stuff I had to throw out because I realized like, I don't really want to go there. I think hacking instant ramen has been done a lot and by people who know it better than me. So I let that one go. And then at some point I realized, if you have a chapter that has, which I have, like, I think there's over 40 sauces in here, that anything else you make in the book, if you make one of those good sauces and smear it all over it,
You'll be in good shape.
or you just eat the sauce and a piece of burnt toast.
Yeah, totally.
So.
And Matt, maybe we'll work our way back this way. I love the structure of this. I'm curious maybe how you came up with the questions.
Yeah.
Did you crowdsource these? And then also you made an interesting note in the intro about how talking to other people then made you go back and change some of your
Definitely.
answers. It just seems like a really interesting way to put this book of advice together.
Well, Evan, we definitely crowdsourced. We sent out a Google survey at the beginning of the writing of the book to like all of our friends, different levels, professional chefs, readers of taste, etc. But really, the book came out of Daniel and I hopping on Zoom and going over a couple topics a day, and really just going for like 45 minutes to 2 hours per topic. And at the end of the topic conversation, so say it's about using dry herbs versus fresh herbs, or which olive oil should I choose, or we have projects that talk about like making yogurt. Like one day I was like, Daniel, like, should I make yogurt? Like, there's so many great yogurts in the restaurants and I'm sorry, bodegas and grocery stores. Is it worth it? And he was like unequivocally like, yes, make yogurt. So we had these conversations, and then I returned to them because I'm the writer and he was the chef, and I was returning to the transcripts and the Zoom conversations, and really through that I interjected my voice in with Daniel's voice, and we came to we wrote in third, which I think is unique for a cookbook. Usually we write in first because it's by a single voice or an author, but we decided third worked because there was a lot of Matt and Daniel says, Matt and Daniel argue, Matt and Daniel disagree, because I think we have different points of view. So that was the structure of writing in third and being very like, let's just be like, the book is the kind of the recording that we had in those moments. And of course, each question has a recipe. So we decided that we needed to answer the question, but the best way to really learn the answer was not just to read our words, some of them self-indulgent, I do admit, there's quite a few words in there, but to actually cook the recipe, which we thought was a good format to land on.
Yeah, I love that conversational vibe to it. I felt like you could sit down and there's almost like a bit of a podcast within a book element to it, because there's these two characters sort of talking to each other and then ending with this recipe. And Nicole, I feel like this must have been a huge question for you as you're writing this book, the first Juneteenth focused cookbook, as this holiday is becoming newly acknowledged, on a national level, and in the aftermath and midst of all the racial justice efforts during the pandemic. How do you choose what to put in there?
So I was in the middle of writing the book when Juneteenth became a nationally recognized holiday. But way before that, I come up with the structure and was super clear about what I wanted to say in this book and how I wanted to present it. But I will say that moment, and a lot of moments throughout the last 2 years, made me either dig deeper into an idea or structure, or made me add a little bit more rigor to the stories and the what I call breadcrumbs of history. I knew in the very beginning that I wanted to create a cookbook, what I call the 3.0 of Black cookbooks. There are a lot of Black cookbooks that have come out in the last few years that, in my opinion, focus very much on people's stories about family or upbringing, and I wanted to do something different with the book. And one of the things I remember pinning on my Pinterest board was a beautiful painting by Carrie James Marshall, and it's very colorful, and there are Black families sitting at a river and a picnic, and I'm like, that is the inspiration for my book. Even before I started with the food, I knew that. So when you open up Watermelon and Red Birds, a cookbook for Juneteenth and Black Celebration, it looks very different from a lot of cookbooks, period, that are on the market. It's colorful. My acknowledgments are up front. I basically, on purpose, try to flip what we constantly see in the cookbook world in terms of structure. So the artwork, and the photography is intentional in the book. Now, when you get down to the recipes and the storytelling, the first piece that I wrote about Juneteenth was in 2017, I think, and it was for the New York Times food section. It was the first time in a long time that any major publication wrote anything about Juneteenth foods. So I talked about the color red and how red is infused in Juneteenth celebrations in addition to Black holidays or Black celebrations. So I used that article and other pieces that I've written over the years, from Bon Appetit to Food and Wine, as a jump off. So my book is structured what I consider the essential foods of the Juneteenth holiday. And I should go back and say this, is that it is the first cookbook, but it's my story of Juneteenth. And there's so many other people will have a very different or similar story of Juneteenth. I grew up in the American South not celebrating Juneteenth. I knew about Juneteenth, but the Juneteenth celebrations mirrored my family reunions or my church homecomings. It's an overlapping thing, so I kept that in mind. So it's structured with the essentials. I start off with the red drink, and then I move to things like barbecue and desserts and ice cream. Then I put in a fair and festivals chapter because it's an essential part of Juneteenth celebrations. And then lastly, I would say throughout the book, this book is just not about Juneteenth. So I was very deliberate to balance out what other Black celebrations that I've experienced that could bring that storytelling into the book.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that. I was going to lead into another question to you on that front, because there's so much more in this book than recipes, and this book is about so much more than food for Juneteenth. I wanted to ask you if you could share a little bit more about some of the other elements you brought into this book. There are sections about care, there are sections about Black-owned brands to support, there are all these other voices that are incorporated into this book, and we'll share this question down the line too. But can you tell us a little bit more about some of the things that you put in there intentionally in that way to expand this beyond just a recipe book, but really a book it felt like a book of kind of like how to live, how to like think about food, how to think about food and community in a really beautiful way.
I think this book fully pushed me into saying that I'm a writer. Yes, I am a great home cook. I am a master home cook, as I said before, but I feel like my writing is really great in this book. I'm going to say it. I'm going to lean into it.
She's right.
Yeah.
Every chapter opens with a long essay. They probably could have been longer, but since we're in pandemic time, and I was begging for another 6 months to get this book out.
What was that conversation like?
But the essays they start each chapter. You don't see that a lot see it in some cookbooks, but essays. And I wanted to make sure too that this book was just not about me, right? It's about a larger community, not just Black people. So you see restaurant friends in the cookbook. You see a list of POC-owned food brands. A lot of them are based in Brooklyn. A lot of them are, Latinx-owned. I was very deliberate in speaking to Juneteenth in a way that spoke to Americana food and American culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to sort of extend that idea of bringing these other voices into the mix, and Cal, you sort of touched on that in your intro, cooking with family and having family involved, and Matt, you as well with Daniel. But Matt, maybe we'll start with you. Beyond Daniel, there are all these other voices from the food world that are reflected in your book. I'm curious how you chose those people, who you were excited to work with, and how it fit into the book.
Well, again, the pandemic allowed us access to a lot of different voices. And we knew from the beginning we weren't going to answer these 100 questions just through Daniel and I, going on Zoom. We had to go outside of our core and talk to experts in the field, folks with really great point of view, with a background that actually reflected the question and answer. So we had the time again to talk to them because it was during the pandemic. So, example, we're talking to Therese Nelson about mac and cheese, and like I wanted to hear like how do you make a master chef yourself, and we talked about how it's more of a Béarnaise sauce, and she really articulated how mac and cheese was served at her favorite place in Newark. Talked to Kathy Irway about soy sauce. Kathy's written a lot for Taste, and I wanted to really get into her brain about this important topic that we kind of don't know how to shop for. Jose Rolat, a great journalist down in Texas, we talked about nixtamalization and tacos, and I had to like find out like soft or hard shell, like, yo, what's your favorite? I mean, so we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of these deep conversations. Andrew Nguyen, we talked about tofu and how she makes tofu at home, and so we needed to, for our own enrichment, selfishly, we had these conversations, but also we formatted it in a way, and again, back to format, because this is a book festival, we felt Q&A was the best way for them, the participants and our friends of Food IQ, to actually articulate the answer in a kind of a conversation, again, like a podcast. And we felt it works. It really worked well. We illustrated. We got a great illustrator to illustrate our friends, and it was the only way this book was going to work, is to have representation from all over the world.
Yeah. And Cal, I know the sections of each of your books start with quotes from maybe from voices that you might not always expect to find in a cookbook, which I found was really interesting to sort of set the tone of the sections. And you also mentioned, of course, cooking with and for family. The author photo is the photo of you and family together. Yeah. And it felt like for each of these, and I felt this for sure in yours, fitting with this panel, the title of this panel, the major ingredient is the cook. It's not the major ingredient is the chef. And I think we've actually seen a bit of a shift in cookbooks away from the single point of view, like a one expert chef, into a more community knowledge approach to cooking. I'd just love to hear more about how that found its way in your process, and maybe how you chose some of those quotes to set up the sections.
Well, yeah, after leaving, after I was at Chez Panisse for 22 years and left there and started to do some different things, I was finishing, I think, my other book and then starting on this book. I also opened and closed a restaurant because we opened in September of 2019, and then everyone knows what happened in March of 2020. We got shut down, and we couldn't really change our format and reopen like a lot of folks did. But in the meantime, I did this podcast that you mentioned called Cooking by Ear, and we would always have a guest, and our idea was like, can we teach people to cook along with us in real time while you listen to the podcast, you cook, and then while the onions are cooking or they're waiting for the water to boil, we would talk about other things with our guests, and it just really helped me to get out of my own chefy head, because I am also, like you, Nicole, consider myself a great home cook, but I was also that like a professional chef, and it's easy to kind of speak in some kind of jargon that maybe people aren't going to get, so you need someone to bring you back. And so I listened to those other voices and chose some of the, like, I have a quote from Big Frida, because Big Frida was one of the guests, and Big Frida, we asked Big Frida if she wanted to do the podcast, and she was like, sure, I can teach you to cook something, and that's not really the podcast format, it's me teaching, but Frida's like, I'll show you how to make booty poppin' potatoes, and how could we say no?
Right. You don't turn down that offer.
And so she's in there, and I like that quote from RuPaul that's, we're born naked, everything else is just drag. And then, one of the projects I did during that time was, this was right before the pandemic, was go with this amazing group of people who were teaching cooking in San Quentin prison there in the Bay Area. And, the guys we would teach them how to cook stuff, but they would tell us about their hacks that they would do, some that weren't really legal, and they didn't really want to talk about those with us that much, which I don't blame them. But one guy said, come into the, they weren't really in cells, they were more like in this dorm situation, and I'll show you how to make this rice bowl that we make. And they had every possible hack that you could think of course, right? And also trying to put every bit of flavor that they possibly could into they would roll back their mattress and use the thing, and they had Flamin' Hot Cheetos were a really important part of it. and they would get a little bit of stuff from the commissary. They'd get stuff sent in. They could do some ordering. There was a little store that they could buy from, and they'd mix jelly with sriracha was like a big thing, and that kind of made me think like, oh, all right, well this is like an extreme situation, and I'm sure those people, once they're not in that situation, aren't going to be cooking that way anymore either. But just like the ideas of how can you draw out flavors, and what can you do when you like basically have no access.
Yeah, which is the history of great cuisine all over. I'm thinking of that, Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, life finds a way, like flavor finds a way, no matter what the restrictions are, we as people, as communities, find ways to make things delicious.
Look, I just want to say, Nicole, I love that your book was inspired by a painting. I've not really heard that before, and I wonder if Carrie James Marshall knows that.
Yeah, I should send him an email.
Send him
right?
a book.
Right? Oh, I should. I mean, I've said it a few times, but yeah, the color palette. I mean, George McCallman. We were just talking about George. You know him from the Bay Area.
Who designed that?
Yeah.
He designed Black
Nice.
Food, which is Brian Terry's latest book. I'm in that book as well. But yeah, the colors. If you just flip through, it looks like a Carrie James Marshall painting.
Yeah.
100%.
Right on.
I'm going to shift tack a little bit and first mention I'd love to take some audience questions, so I'll let you have a few minutes to think about those and call out if you do. One thing I found interesting in each of these books is, as in many cookbooks, there's like a tool section. What do you need in your kitchen? I was introduced to the corn zipper through your book, Nicole, which I didn't know about. Obviously, Summer of Corn Kid, it was the perfect time to find out about this. But I'm curious what favorite tool you may mention in your books you'd want to highlight for the home cooks here. Maybe Nicole, I'll start with you. Sorry, I keep putting you in the hot seat.
I would say the corn zipper. Every year, there's an article, somebody, Taste, maybe not Taste, but some other publication will come out like, here's the perfect way to get all the corn off the cob for your corn salad.
Not Taste.
Oh, no, yeah, that's not Taste. That's not y'all.
That's not
Maybe a whole history on corn zippers.
What's a corn zipper?
Yeah, seriously.
Right. So
That's the question.
Exactly. Exactly.
I don't know
should
what
do
it
an
is.
article.
Let's
for
do
you
it.
like that,
Let's
yeah.
It's like a
So the
ring?
corn zipper, I use a XOX. Is that the name of the brand? Is
OXO?
that OXO? Is
Yeah,
that how you
OXO,
say-
yeah.
OXO corn zipper. It's literally, it has a blade. It looks like, okay, this is crazy what I'm about to say. If you've ever gone and had a pedicure and the little shaver
Oh, yeah.
that they use, not the one that was the ridge, but the one that just like zips the skin off, sorry. But y'all
Keep
see
that
what I'm
image in
saying.
mind next time
It
you're zipping
literally
your
looks
corn.
exactly like that.
Oh, that kind of corn.
Yeah, so it's a corn zip, and you just slide it off and it comes
That's
off
nice.
perfectly. But it's so funny because I did so much research about corn zippers. There are a few on the market that are very old school that has like a wooden handle. I personally think that is the best tool. I don't believe in this whole, sure, I'll do a hack, but
Right.
why just, if you use a lot of corn and you buy a lot of corn in the summertime and you take it off the cob, make your life easier. And so my whole tool section is that. And it's about easy, but also adding fun.
Yeah.
I know we live in New York
They're
City.
fun, yeah.
Right? I know we
Yeah.
live in New York City, but if you have a snow cone maker, it changes the game, okay? It literally changes the game. So I riff in my section about what I consider some of the best snow cone makers. Actually, KitchenAid this year came up with an attachment. So if you have a KitchenAid mixer and you don't want to buy another gadget, there's an attachment that you can attach, and it makes really fluffy shade.
So it's all about the texture. It's not pebble. It goes like one
Exactly.
better than pebble, right?
Yeah, so
Into that.
listen, I'm all about buying a gadget
Yeah, I think
and
it's,
tools.
if it's one of those
Yeah.
task-specific gadgets that really works, it's so satisfying. There's so many that
100%.
don't.
Yeah.
But Matt, how about you?
Well, we have a whole chapter called Tools and Technology. So we were talking about like what's the difference between a $30 knife and a $150 knife, and we tried to really get into like some of the things you hear about, like is sous vide worth it? And a short answer is no for a home cook. You may disagree
wow.
with me, but I think the one gadget item that we think everyone should have is a digital scale. I think measuring by weight, particularly for pastry, is essential. We go into why volumetric measures are okay, but certainly not accurate. And you wonder, why are those cookies really doughy and not great? Well, it's because maybe you didn't weigh it. Also, just for coffee, personally, I think weighing your coffee and having a real like system, and we have a whole question about coffee, using the digital scale really changes the game and lets you really think about coffee in a different way. They cost like $15 on Amazon or at your local kitchen store, or Walmart or wherever. I mean, so it's just worth having it, and it really is quite easy to use. I think it seems complicated, but it's actually quite easy. So that's my answer.
I got asked a similar question like this by a local newspaper. I won't say who they were, but it's a New York paper. And they had this column about, like, what's your favorite gadget, you know? And I really wanted to, I wanted to promote the book, and so I was like, well, my favorite gadget is the Y-shaped vegetable peelers that cost like $2.99.
Yeah.
That was my thing, and they were like, well, but what is special about that? I was like, nothing is special about it. But it just works so well. And they were like, well, I don't know if that's really fits in our column, because they wanted like something more specific.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, how about like the box grater, a cheese grater? Those are really good. They were like, I think
you're a
maybe
real
we're
thrilling
gonna
interview,
pass. Eventually, I called them and I was like, look, all my books are about, like, not about telling people to get a fancy gadget. They're about, like, sure, if you got your corn zipper that you love or your digital scale, right on. But like, if you don't have that, you should still cook. You shouldn't let it hold you back.
Yes. Yeah.
And I felt like I could stretch myself and make something up, and I did tell them the kind of box grater I really like. That wasn't enough.
They weren't.
Yeah. I mean, if there's anything more satisfying than a task-specific gadget that works, it's a versatile, inexpensive gadget that works and lasts. And those Y-shaped peelers, a box grater, things that you're just going to use all over your cooking.
I think you should always replace your peeler like after 3 months. Like, that's the thing. Like, buy 5 of them and have them all stashed away, because like everyone hates when you have a dull peeler. They cost $3. Buy 8 of them, stash them away.
Also, you can kind of sharpen them a little bit.
Oh, you can?
Yeah, with the steel, you can run it on a steel. Kind of works.
give it a little bit more light.
I just throw them out.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
All
See,
right.
Chef?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
can learn something from you.
Anyone out here with a question they want to throw in? I can also keep rolling, but yeah.
Yeah, what did you want to call your book?
Just everyone heard the question in case it didn't get around. We're curious what
was
the
my
original
title?
desired title of Burnt
Okay.
Toast was going to be.
The original title was Bad Food Good, as in how to make bad food good. I had it. I did the cover design myself. I thought it was going to look really cool. Bad food good. I was always a little tentative about that because I felt like maybe it revealed my my elevated access to really excellent ingredients, and that basically I was casting a judgment on all the food that y'all get. It's bad, but I'll show you how to make it good. That wasn't my publisher's objection. Was they thought that it was like how to make actively bad food good, like it was a dumpster diver cookbook or something. And I was like, well, I don't think that's a risk. I don't think people are going to really think that suddenly I'm just going into that, like, how do you take some rotten food and make it good? So we came up with this title, and I like it. Yeah.
Any others out there? Yes.
How has your books affected how you go to restaurants? How you see different chefs?
So the question is, how have your books, writing the books, I guess, affected how your experience going into restaurants and how you see other chefs? I know some of us are chefs, some of us are home cooks who enjoy restaurants. But yeah, how has the cookbook process changed that experience for you?
I'd say just I wrote the book with a chef who was an active chef who was unemployed at the time because his restaurants were closed or not open. And I'd say it always strikes me how little money there is to go around in restaurants. And I can't stress that enough, that there isn't pay equity, there isn't, because of rising costs, we just don't pay enough for food in America. We pay as a culture around 5% of our budgets to 10%. In other parts of the world, it's up to 40%. We just don't value food in the same way. So to answer that question, I just think paying for food in restaurants is part of supporting restaurants. So if you can only afford one meal a month, then great, but pay it and really let the chefs live and live a life that's sustainable for them. So.
I love restaurants. I'm constantly in restaurants. I love the communal aspect of restaurants, the chefs, the people that work there, and so I'm oftentimes inspired by a meal, and I go home and riff off that. I didn't get to do a lot of that in this cookbook, but I was able to mention some of my favorite people. I will say though, but what's been really great is this summer, with the help of Resy, which is a restaurant platform reservation tech company, they sponsored a tour all throughout the U.S. I went to all Black-owned restaurants, Seattle, San Francisco, L.A., Georgia, where I did book events in restaurants. So I was able to, safely have dinner, celebrate my book with diverse people. Mm-hmm. And so that was really cool because we got to support Black-owned restaurants in a very tangible way. I got to collaborate with chefs and their staff on bringing my food to life, or them riffing off of the book. So I would say for me, this book is a resource for restaurants. It's an inspiration for the people who are working there, and it's also a thank you to them. So yeah, that's how restaurants kind of fit into this project for me.
I'll just say that just like you at home, all the cooks in the restaurant, when like they roast a pan of vegetables and the ones on the edges are burnt, we all fight over those and we eat them. And so that's why I have a couple recipes for like what to do with that stuff that's kind of burnt and how to make it like extra good.
Definitely the best.
We only have a few minutes left. I'm going to wrap up with two more quick questions. One maybe less quick than the other, but the theme that I sort of felt as I was thinking about this panel and centering the cook and all these books across them, the books really feel like they're about giving agency to people in the kitchen, in their lives, in relation to food, whether it's through celebrating or discovering or expanding tradition and joy and holiday celebrations, whether it's about not being embarrassed or ashamed to ask certain questions and to be able to have the answers to them, or whether it's being able to come back from a failure or a mistake in the kitchen and gain new confidence for the next time that happens. So I'm just curious, if you were to give a piece or two of advice that you feel like is the major ingredient in the cook, what is an important thing in someone's mindset or approach to cooking that will help them get to that place of agency and ownership of their food? Maybe I'll start down with Cal and work our way back.
Sure. I think in this, the title of my second cookbook is A Recipe for Cooking, and I feel like that that choosing what you're going to cook for this meal should take into account everything, including the weather, your mood, who's going to help you clean up, what's the nature of the meal you're making, and that all of those things, including the actual chicken and onions and peppers or whatever that you're cooking, go into making it successful. So, for example, if you're having a party for some friends and it's like maybe it's like an important one, maybe it's like some new friends, or maybe don't choose the thing you've never made before, or if you're just kind of tired and you don't want to work too hard, then you choose the thing that fits that fits what you want to do, and it keeps cooking within the context of your life, which it always kind of needs to be to stay in balance.
Yeah, that's great advice.
2, read the recipe follow the recipe. Riffing is part of cooking, and that's the joy of a kind of experimentation. But honestly, read the recipe and follow the recipe. The other is, maybe break the habit or break the norm when you're food shopping, especially in New York. We're here in Brooklyn. Go and go to H Mart. Go to an Armenian bodega. Go to a Vietnamese owned grocery store, and just check it out, buy a few things, and ask questions. I think that's the one thing that I found writing. I've written 2 books about Korean food, and in researching those books is just go out and ask questions, and it's a real pleasure. And don't feel intimidated, because nobody's judging you. Everyone, my experience has been very positive. Ask the question, and it will be answered. So that's those.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm going straight to my cookbook. I couldn't come up with anything in my head, but I'm like,
No.
let me go where I wrote it down.
I do that all the time. You got to open your book.
Yeah, I have a section titled Menu Planning, and I give 4 points, and I'm just gonna say one sentence. Under there's more you can do that day, meaning, I don't know what I'm saying. Prepping in advance, that's what I'm saying, making ahead.
Yeah.
But this is what I say here is that my general rule is you need one showstopper for your menu. Like, decide what thing or things the guests will be talking about when they leave, or they say, oh my gosh, remember when I came to your house and you made the fill in the blank? Like, whatever you're cooking, you should always have that showstopper, that knockout thing. So when I am cooking for Juneteenth or Thanksgiving or a regular Sunday dinner, I'm constantly thinking about what is the thing that I know that I can, be the blowout thing and people will talk about. And probably that's the thing that I've made a million gazillion times, right? But I may just switch it up with a chili paste or something that I bought at a market or something. So yeah, that's my advice. One showstopper.
I love that. And then the last thing, just in a word or two before we wrap up, and maybe to leave this in people's minds and mouths as they leave here, what taste do you want to leave in people's mouths when they finish your book?
For me, I want to leave a taste of hope and joy.
I think we should support Evan too. I want to make sure we talk about his book, the book Contents. For real, I
Totally.
don't think it was said enough, but he has copies for sale here. It's an amazing book, and you can walk away with it. So I think my last would be pick up a copy of his book.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I guess mine would be scrape the burnt part off. It'll be fine.
A little bitterness is okay, right?
That's great.
I'm with that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I just want to say thanks again, everyone, for coming, braving the rain, and being here with us. Thanks, of course, to Cal, Matt, and Nicole.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, all their books are available from Community Bookstore, who is the bookseller for today, through their website, and, of course, from local bookstores near you. Can we just give them a round of applause?